Edward I, June 17, 1239 – July 7, 1307, one of the most formidable monarchs of medieval England, left an indelible mark on British history through his military conquests, legal reforms, and centralization of royal power. Known both for his towering stature and commanding presence, earning him the nickname Longshanks, and his relentless campaigns against the Welsh and the Scots, Edward was a king whose reign laid the foundations of a more unified England. Early life and background. Edward was born at the Palace of Westminster to King Henry III and Eleanor of Provence. He was the first son of the king and therefore the heir apparent. From an early age, Edward was immersed in the complex politics of the English court. His upbringing was heavily influenced by the baronial conflicts that plagued his father's reign, particularly the power struggles between Henry III and powerful nobles like Simon de Montfort. Edward was well educated and showed an early interest in warfare and governance. His physical characteristics, tall and athletic, were complemented by a strong-willed and often stern temperament. These qualities would come to define his approach to rulership. Participation in the Barons' Wars. As a young man, Edward initially aligned with the rebel barons led by Simon de Montfort during the Second Barons' War, 1264–1267, driven by his frustrations with his father's reign. However, he soon returned to royalist loyalty and played a significant role in the Battle of Evesham in 1265, where de Montfort was defeated and killed. Edward's military prowess during these campaigns elevated his reputation and proved his capabilities as a future king. Crusade to the Holy Land. In 1270, Edward embarked on the Ninth Crusade to the Holy Land, a journey that demonstrated both his piety and martial zeal. Though the crusade did not achieve its broader goals and was largely a symbolic venture, Edward's leadership during the campaign further solidified his status. He was wounded by a poisoned dagger in an assassination attempt but survived, returning to England in 1274 to assume the throne following the death of his father in 1272. Coronation and early reign. Edward was crowned king in 1274. From the outset, he was determined to consolidate royal authority and restore order to the kingdom. His legal reforms were far-reaching and aimed at enhancing the power of the monarchy while creating a more structured and predictable legal system. He commissioned a number of statutes, including the Statute of Westminster, 1275, and the Statute of Mortmain, 1279, that tackled issues such as land ownership, justice, and the rights of tenants. Conquest of Wales. One of Edward's most enduring legacies is the conquest of Wales. Viewing the semi-independent Welsh principalities as a threat to English sovereignty, Edward launched a full-scale military campaign between 1277 and 1283. The final defeat of Llywelyn ap Griffith, the last native prince of Wales, marked the effective end of Welsh independence. Edward fortified his rule through the construction of massive stone castles like Caernarfon, Conwy, and Harlech, which symbolized English dominance. To cement English authority, he bestowed the title Prince of Wales upon his son, the future Edward II, a tradition that has continued to the present day. Conflict with Scotland. Edward's ambitions extended northward to Scotland, particularly after the Scottish succession crisis following the death of King Alexander III in 1286. Edward was invited to arbitrate among competing claimants to the Scottish throne, eventually installing John Balliol as a puppet king. However, Balliol's resistance and the resurgence of Scottish nationalism led to a prolonged and bitter conflict. Edward invaded Scotland in 1296, capturing major cities and stripping Balliol of his crown. However, resistance continued, most notably under William Wallace, whose victory at the Battle of Stirling Bridge, 1297, shocked the English. Edward eventually defeated Wallace at Falkirk in 1298 and later had him captured and executed in 1305. Edward's war in Scotland continued until his death, and he earned the sobriquet Hammer of the Scots for his relentless attempts to subdue the nation. Relationship with Parliament and reforms. Though a warrior king, Edward also played a significant role in the development of English parliamentary institutions. The Model Parliament of 1295 is particularly notable, as it included not just nobles and clergy but also commoners, knights and burgesses, laying the groundwork for the future House of Commons. His legal and administrative reforms sought to enforce the king's justice throughout the realm and limit the power of feudal magnates. His attempts to tax the clergy and raise funds for war efforts, however, led to tensions with the church and the nobility. Personal life and death. Edward was married twice. His first and most beloved wife was Eleanor of Castile, with whom he had at least 16 children, though many died young. Eleanor died in 1290, and Edward famously commemorated her with a series of monumental crosses, Eleanor crosses, built at each place her funeral procession stopped on its way to London. He later married Margaret of France, with whom he had several more children. Despite his harshness in war, Edward's relationships with his family, particularly Eleanor, were marked by genuine affection. In 1307, while en route to another campaign in Scotland, Edward died at Burgh by Sands, near the Scottish border. He was buried in Westminster Abbey, and on his tomb was carved the inscription, "Here lies Edward, the hammer of the Scots." Legacy. Edward I's reign was one of the most impactful of the Middle Ages. His military campaigns reshaped the map of Britain, while his legal and administrative reforms left a lasting imprint on English governance. Though often remembered for his harsh tactics and unrelenting pursuit of dominion, Edward was a king who defined kingship through action, authority, and an enduring sense of national unity.
Thank you for watching. Please subscribe our channel.